Hi, my name is Lisa and today I'm going to be doing a presentation for the GSD Winter Seasons Presentations Collections, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about genetic counselling, glycogen storage disease and my personal experience. So I was diagnosed in 1992 when I was 18 months old with GSD type 1B. I became interested in science as I was in and out of hospital, and growing up I realised I wanted to know what was going on around me, why they were taking blood samples, what they meant, and I eventually tried to become sort of as knowledgeable as I could about my own condition so I could talk to other healthcare professionals about it. And currently now I'm training to be a genetic counsellor in the NHS. I'm about halfway through my course at the moment, and I'm hoping to give a bit of an overview of the genetic component around glycogen storage disease and how genetics and genetic counselling service can help, and my experience of the condition. So as you're probably aware, there are many types of GSD, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of time to go into it all today, but the GSD charity website has a really good overview on most of these GSDs. Type 1 through 9, and there are other more rare variants of GSD that are also mentioned as well. Glycogen storage disease also has a genetic component, and commonly that is known as recessive inheritance, which I will be explaining a little bit more about on the next slide. With all science there's always a caveat. Type 9, one of the type 9s, there's 4, is inherited through X-linked recessive means, and also occasionally it can be found that GSD has occurred in a patient spontaneously for the first time, which is called de novo inheritance. As you all probably know, it is really important to get the right diagnosis for the management of each condition. If I take the example of GSD type 1, there's type 1A and type 1B, and type 1B also has an extra symptom where the person is unable to fight off infections because they have a lack of neutrophils. So that's a really important part of managing the condition, is to know this information and be able to treat that part of the condition if it is type 1B. So I've just created a little table to show some of the different types of GSDs, and this is really just to highlight all of the different genes that can be involved in these main types of GSD. As you can see, even type 9 has 4 subunits with all slightly different symptoms, and it's really important to know that these symptoms link to different genes and how that can be important in making sure that the right genes are tested within the patients. I've just got a little diagram here to explain recessive inheritance. So as hopefully you know, we all have genes which are our body's instructions, and we have 2 copies of each gene. One is inherited from our mum and one is inherited from our dad. So for the purposes of this picture, we have 2 unaffected carriers, and if they have a child, they have a 1 in 4 chance that the child will inherit the abnormal gene, which is the cause of glycogen storage disease, and they will be affected. There is a 2 in 3 chance that the child is unaffected but is still a carrier of that gene change, and there's a 1 in 4 chance that the child does not inherit either of the gene changes and therefore is unaffected. So a quick overview of the clinical genetics service. In the UK, it's covered all the way from the top of Scotland to the bottom of Cornwall. So essentially the clinical genetic services get called in from referrals, and they help make a diagnosis in a patient and explain that to the family and what different types of tests are available or what the results mean from a genetic test that has been done. Also, they are able to refer to appropriate specialists. So for a child, that might be a specialist paediatrician, or in adult medicine that could be a metabolic consultant who has an interest in inherited metabolic conditions. So I have found a quote from Robert Rester about the definition of a genetic counsellor. I appreciate that if you have not had to see a genetic counsellor, you may not know exactly what one does or what the title means. And Robert Rester was quite a significant person in the concept of genetic counselling, so I picked this quote to explain that genetic counselling is a process of helping people adapt to the medical, psychological and family implications of how the genetics contributes to a condition, and for genetic counsellors to be able to explain to families what that means, the chances of the reoccurrence in the family, and what tests are available, as well as management of the condition. It's also to promote informed choices within the family so that the family are aware of all the different options available to them before they make any choices. Genetic counselling isn't about cloning people or making everybody the same, and it's not about us expecting you to lie on a couch and explain, your deepest and darkest fears. And mainly our aims are to provide information, facilitate decision making and support, and this can be in different quantities or at different appointments depending where people are in their diagnosis with glycogen storage disease. So I thought for this presentation I would talk about my mum's experience when I was diagnosed. So I remember her telling me that when I was diagnosed in Great Ormond Street, there was a doctor looking after me who explained it was a genetic condition and that my mum and dad were both carriers of this condition, and in the future my mum would have a 1 in 4 chance of having another child affected with GSD. She didn't have any input from genetics or genetic counselling, and although it was probably fairly new in the practice, I believe it still may have been available at the time. My mum felt quite lonely with the diagnosis, especially living in Devon, and she reached out to the GSD charity for support, and she shared with me the book that she received, and yes, I think the stain on the bottom may be cornflour. I just thought it was great to show you the book, and here's a page from the book where essentially it is explaining the science behind genetics and genes. So this led me to think about what would happen if I was born today. And through a quick Google search, I could find a lot of articles that were related to genetics and different types of glycogen storage disease. And I appreciate that not everybody has the time to read these, but it's really important to know that they're available for healthcare professionals so that they are able to read them and get a good grasp on the different types of GSD and the genes that are involved, so that they're able to give a good service to those patients. So if we think about how genetics and genetic counsellors can help us now, there is a lot more information, as you can see, into the condition. When we think about testing in glycogen storage disease, there are now more extensive ways to test and a lot more consistent ways. So there are uses of panels. So if a paediatrician thinks that there is a chance that the child might have GSD, it's able to look for all of the known genes that are involved in GSD. So it can either discount GSD or it can specifically say which GSD the patient has. There is a lot more in the way of reproductive options, so families are able to have prenatal testing where the gene is known, and this means that they can understand if their child has GSD before it's born, which can sometimes really be helpful for management of the condition at that early stage. There are also other reproductive options where we look into a special type of IVF, and the embryos can be genetically screened to see if they are affected with GSD or not, which means the couple can have a healthy, unaffected child. There's a lot more testing done and a lot more extensive testing done, such as whole genome sequencing, and unfortunately that can throw up results which the geneticists still aren't sure if they are relevant to the condition, and these are sometimes called variants of uncertain significance. And essentially this means that the variant that has been found in the child or the adult could be related to the condition, or it may just be part of everyday variants which is found in genes naturally. I did manage to speak to some people through social media, and some people still don't have any input from genetics or genetic counsellors through their journey. So perhaps we still have a way to go to make sure that genetics and GSD are working together. This got me thinking about how we are able to help the genetic service and what different ways we're able to spread the word to be able to make this condition known to more healthcare professionals. So on the GSD charity website, there is an e-learning course on GSDs which GPs can access, which is really helpful for GPs who don't know much about the condition. Also, it's important to support the GSD charity as well, because they're able to fund publications which will be seen worldwide and therefore raise the profile of glycogen storage disease. I know that a lot of people with GSD, especially in America, have become doctors and healthcare professionals, and this is a great way to spread the word about glycogen storage disease, because there are healthcare professionals out there who will recognise the symptoms more easily, and hopefully, as I am able to become a genetic counsellor, I will be able to teach some of my colleagues around the condition. And I think it's really important to be your own expert in the condition. A lot of people won't have come across GSD, and as a person who has lived with GSD or has a family member with GSD, you know a lot about the condition and how it manifests in that particular patient. GSD is very individual for each person, and I think that's where sometimes diagnosis can be difficult. So be your own expert and don't be afraid to tell the healthcare professionals what you know. I've also put links to some of our social media pages down the bottom, which are also good to find out more information about the condition. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you've learned a little bit more about the different types of GSD, how they're inherited, and how genetics and genetic counselling can play a really big role in management of conditions.